calling in from the city of Porto in Portugal, way across the Atlantic, making sure we're all on our toes anyway. May we have the national anthem, please? All rise. The first order of business is to determine if there are any declarations of interest and the general nature thereof. All right, all quiet. Next point is that we are not having any in-camera session this evening. And then for the adoption of the agenda, moved by Councillor Fody, seconded by Councillor maybe, that the agenda be adopted as circulated. All in favor? Carried. Next is to the consent agenda. With the adoption and or receipt of minutes. Moved by Brian Maybe, seconded by Councillor Terry Fody, that the February 6, 2023 public meeting minutes be adopted as circulated, and that the January 16, 2023 council meeting minutes and February 6, 2023 committee of the whole meeting minutes be adopted as circulated, and that the December 13, 2022 committee of adjustment meeting minutes be received and filed. All in favor? No. Councillor maybe.
Thank you. And through you, Deputy Mayor. First off, the January 16th shows that I was in attendance and I was not. So that should be changed. I know that on an earlier document, I noticed that I wasn't there, but on these minutes, it indicates that I am. And I did show regrets on a previous set, but. And then my other question was Committee of Adjustment. What is quorum on that committee? Because there's only 2 members who were present out of the 5. If you read the report. So it's a question which I'd like to see if we have an answer to.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Oki, through you. I will double check those minutes, but I have noted that in the minutes here. But I believe a majority did attend the Committee of Adjustment meeting, but I will speak to our Secretary Treasurer to confirm.
We're getting some crosstalk. So Councillor Gurrell, you were there or you were a guest?
Yes. Yes, I was a guest and there was a quorum. And there were people on Zoom, I believe.
Just that if we have a virtual meeting and we attend, then we're noted as in attendance, but their records didn't
I
show
was
that.
just a guest attending.
Yeah, no, but I meant if it's a member,
Ah.
then they should have been a voting member
Mm.
and it should have been noted on the minutes, I believe. Thank you.
All right, so we have a motion here. I suggest that we carry the meeting minutes as amended. Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried. Okay. What's next? Initials good enough? To read all these out, do I? Right, we have a series of staff reports. Read them all out. No, okay. And the okay, the mover and seconder are moved by Councillor Fody and seconded by Councillor Maybe. The council approved the staff reports as recommended February 6, 2023 committee of the whole meeting. Are there any questions or comments regarding the staff reports? Would any members like to have any of the staff reports pulled from the consent agenda and voted on separately? Are there any motions you want pulled? Any? All right. All in favor? Passed. The next item we have are information items. Moved by Councillor Fody and seconded by Councillor Jameson that the information items be received and filed. So we have several items here. Does anyone want to review any of them? Councillor Lackey.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I'd like to touch on several, if not all of them. Nothing really major. And through you, first of all, to the Director of Finance. Are you there, Kate? Yes, I believe I saw you there.
Yeah.
I just looked on, I forget what page of the annual surplus, where it goes year to year in comparison, and we seem to have had the big jump in 2019. Was that due to COVID?
Through you, Your Worship. So the surplus that's showing on the financial indicator report would be the surplus that's accrual basis off the audited financial statements. So it's not the budget to actual surplus that we normally would look at through the year. It's going to be a bit different number. I can definitely look into it further for you, but it's not the number that we normally would look at to compare to budget through the year. It actually involves the surplus based on the income statement, which has amortization and other things in it that we don't normally look at. So it's a bit more complicated.
Okay, thank you. And the other was, I think around the same page, down further, was the households. Now, I understand in talking to staff today, that it could be the difference between the sources of information that are being used for the report. But again, 2019, we dropped 13 households. I wondered, was there something that we're not aware of, where we now have 13 households less?
Yeah, through you, your worship. So when I was looking at that today, and unfortunately, I think that was before my time that was completed. But if you look at 2017 to 18, it's 5,936, then 5,963. It almost looks to me like it could have been a typo, a typing error in the 2018 information, and that it didn't actually go down, because it probably in 2018, it should have been the same as 2017.
Yeah, I did notice there was two consistencies, and then there was an up by
Yeah.
a few in 18 and then down a few. Yeah, I think we were up 30 or 27, and then it went down 13 the next year. So I just
Yeah.
wondered if there's inconsistencies in information.
I apologize, as I can't tell you for sure without doing a ton of digging to go back through the records to see how they were put together before.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. Thank you. The next one I have would be for MPAC. Just in looking at their map of growth in renovation permits within Ontario. We look like we're in a dismal 1% increase, where even Northern Ontario had 4. And I think after that, there was sort of an average of 18-ish, somewhere in that neighborhood. And I'm just wondering if anybody on the staff level knows why perhaps that is.
I can try to answer it. I mean, through your worship. So MPAC is going to be attending, I think it's in March, which this might be a good question for Kim Bennett, who will be attending that one of our meetings, so we can ask some questions and she can go over this information. The only I guess thought I have is that the area that's in Eastern Ontario, 1%, if it includes a lot of rural areas that don't have as much growth, like our township, even though we have a lot of building permits, the actual dollar value of those permits is relatively small compared to our assessment base. So for a percentage, it might not actually represent that much growth in the entire region.
Okay, I guess I'll buy that. And I think the rest of my notes, I've got some support from staff today, so I won't bring those up and waste everybody's time. I got the answers to my questions. So one was about Bill 23 and Halton Hills and how sort of that would affect us. And there's examples of ways that would help us and ways that it would hurt us. So I think we'll just accept that for information. And I don't think they're done with that bill yet, perhaps. So we'll see where that goes down the road. Anyway, I thank you for your time.
Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you to the Director of Finance. Just a question, is there any highlight in there that you think our attention should be drawn to? You see these numbers daily. I mean, I liked most of what I saw there.
Through your worship. So are you talking about the financial indicators report or this MPAC?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So for the financial indicators report, I didn't see anything in the report that was alarming or caused any concern. Everything was pretty much in line with previous years, which is kind of what I look for, is consistency year over year. And if anything, hoping for some improvement in the ratios, which I think generally they all appeared to be what I expected. So I didn't have any concerns.
Well, thank you. Led by you, our reserves look good. That's the healthiest they've looked since we've sat at this table. Thank you. If I might, Deputy Mayor,
Go ahead.
I don't know who wants to comment or if anybody does with regards to the Cataraqui Conservation Authority. When I get a telephone bill, it's itemized. If I get a hydro bill, it's itemized. And then we get this bill here for $170,168.76. And it's just kind of crassly presented to us. Could we not get a little more of a breakdown as to why the increase? I mean, it's one thing to ask, but maybe politeness should be on the agenda. Thank you.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. So in December, the council considered the CRCA budget, which itemized all the projects that they were spending. They also gave us notice of their proposed increase for their levy. It's approximately $5,773 more than last year's levy. And if I do my math right, it's a 3.5% increase. So I think the letter from the regional CRCA really was premised on us having seen the budget in December with the itemization of all the projects, and they gave us the heads up of this was the allocation. So I think they were a little brief, understanding that we had prior notice to what was going on. Katrina Furlanetto, who is the CEO of CRCA, will be visiting with us in March to talk about what's going on, particularly Bill 23, the floodplain mapping program, our service agreement that we're going to be doing with them going forward, the impacts of all of this together. And maybe that's something that she can provide some further information if you'd like.
Right. Councillor Lackey again, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you. In talking to our Director of Planning, it's my understanding that due to a couple of the bills that have passed by the provincial government, that there will be some changes to CRCA and they will be revamping this year. And we will have an opportunity to get a breakdown as far as what services that they will be providing. So I guess this year, if I miss anything, Director, let me know. It's status quo this year, even though the changes will take place this year. We won't see anything till 2024. And then we're hopefully going to see a breakthrough. If I'm actually the Deputy Mayor, would probably know about this as well, correct?
Thank you. There's their mandate's been cut way back.
Yes.
They won't be commenting on a lot of things they were before, especially with regard to building permits. And it might be that our Director of Planning has more detail on it
and
regarding planning, but there's still to deal with watersheds and hazards.
Right.
For one thing, which was their core responsibility initially, and source water protection.
And perhaps our levy will decrease as well.
Thank you, through you. If I could just provide a little bit of clarification, there's a couple of different things going on with the conservation authorities. The one being the change in their mandate, which is going to reflect on the service agreement. So the service agreement we have this year stands as it exists and was previously executed. But going forward, and one of the things that will be spoken to in the delegation next month is that the requirement is on the conservation authority to look at fees based on their core mandate. And then there's additional fees for services beyond their core mandate that will need to be itemized and separated out, and that the township will need to either opt in or opt out of. So that will affect the levy. As it relates to Bill 23, as noted by the Deputy Mayor, their role is changing as it relates to commenting on planning applications. So they will be commenting on natural hazards, source water, and flooding protection, but the Conservation Authority will no longer be able to comment on natural heritage. So that's a change in terms of the service delivery that they provide to the township. Just looking at that, they still have their permitting process though. So while they are still applicable law as it relates to building permits. So that function will still be happening as it currently does with the conservation authorities. And Katrina will be providing more clarification around that when she comes.
Councillor Jameson.
Deputy Mayor, through you to the planner. And I appreciate you sending all the material, and I'm trying to wade through it. But I do want to ask through the Deputy Mayor. My reading tells me we can anticipate some increased work, put it that way, within the township as a result of 23 and 109, is it 109? Together look like they're going to create greater work for us. And are you anticipating that we're going to see an increase of our costs internally as a result of all these changes?
Through you, Deputy Mayor. We actually had a meeting with the counties last week to talk about ways to approach some of this. Some of the options we're looking at is perhaps the county could bring in some consultants on retainer, given the volume that would be coming in from the lower tiers in terms of retaining that third-party consultant for that function. So the service that won't be delivered any longer is review of natural heritage, which includes environmental impact statements and that type of work, species at risk. So none of that can be reviewed by the Conservation Authority any longer. For studies like that we currently have, we would need to go external to retain a consultant to do that review on behalf of the township, and we would be charging that cost back to the developer. So it's not going to result in additional costs, but the pressure it causes is the additional time that's going to be required to retain that third-party consultant and have that work done, particularly in light of the legislation that's shortening timelines and making requirements more strict in terms of turning around approvals on applications. So it's something we're trying to figure out.
Thank you, Madam Planner. Councillor Grell.
If folks, I was just wondering, I'm having trouble with 9.2. It's not loading onto my computer. I tried my phone, I tried my computer. Is it something on my end, or is that everything else is loading appropriately and that one isn't? And I've read it before, so I don't understand. It could be something over here. I'm just not sure. Okay. It's an excellent report. I don't want to hold this up. We can move on unless someone else has some.
Let's see what it gives. Can we share the screen if necessary? Okay. Mhm.
Sure.
While we're waiting for that, gentlemen, are there any other comments or questions about any of the other ones? Councillor Maybe, and then Councillor Fody.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I also have some questions about the town of Trent Hills and their document that indicates that we also could have a lot of the barriers at which they're finding part of their day-to-day business. So it is with great interest that we find out what's going to happen and what other changes with Bill 23 is coming down the road to us that may influence how we do our business. So as much as it's a working document almost, because it's not complete, and they've said that, it is interesting to know what else they're thinking of and how we can implement some of that. And I know Director of Planning was indicating that it has a lot more to go through and other implementations that happen here. And I'm sure the building department will also have it. So it is with great interest that we find out more information on this and how it will impact us. Thank you.
I'll just, Madam Planner, do you have an impression of the biggest impact of this bill on our township and region, perhaps?
Sure. So we've been meeting as planner groups across the United Counties to try and figure out how we're going to manage a lot of this. There's a lot of different impacts that it makes to all of our processes for building and planning. So I'll start with heritage. First of all, from a heritage perspective, every property that's listed on the heritage register but not designated is required to be reviewed for consideration for designation within the next 2 years. Heritage register. So looking at our register, that's 81 properties right now that need to be reviewed for consideration for designation and prioritized. And there are reports on the council agenda with respect to that in terms of establishing a working group to start some of that work. In Lansdowne, the impact within the service area is that Bill 23 automatically allows 3 residential units per property. So the density within Lansdowne could potentially be increased by 3 units on each property. So notwithstanding that we may have zoning that says single unit, 3 units are now allowed on the properties. So we have to consider the impact of that on our infrastructure and ability to service growth. The other piece of it is we're no longer allowed to use site plan control on anything under 10 residential units. So where we use site plan control as a tool to control a lot of development on the properties, even if it was 4 units, to look at parking, look at buffering, look at outdoor spaces and lighting, we can no longer use that if it's a development less than 10 residential units. Another element of it was that appeal provisions are removed. So for any committee of adjustment or consent authority decision, there's no third-party approvals permitted any longer. So if you're a neighbor that opposes a minor variance application, you no longer have the right to appeal that application. That's the main ones that impact us, aside from the changes to the Conservation Authority, because as I said, the Conservation Authority does have a specific skill set and is able to review things such as species at risk and environmental impact statements. In looking at our files from 2023, we received probably 10 to 12 environmental impact statements, mostly in support of applications for consent and zoning bylaw amendments that we will now need to go to a third-party reviewer on rather than using the services of the Conservation Authority. So that's a brief summary. We're still trying to figure out the impacts. The other piece of it was Bill 109 changed the timelines and tightened up the timelines as it relates to the processing of applications. So we're working through that.
Okay, Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you, I'm going to ask our mayor this question, just because I know you've been at a couple of meetings since we were last together as a council. With regards to Bill 23 and MPAC, has there been any light shone by the province or MPP? Has anything changed there, or is everything still status quo at this point? Thank you.
At this point, through you, Mr. Chair, at this point, no date has been given in regards to an MPAC change. We had the MPAC group come and present at last county meeting. So that would have been last Wednesday. So I'm sure we'll receive very similar outline as to what it is, but really it's up to the government to pull the trigger on the new phase in. And we've asked the government to do that sooner rather than later so that we can put people's minds at ease so that they understand the process and we can communicate that out. But as of right now, the province hasn't made a move as to when that phase in will begin.
Thank you.
Councillor Gorell, are you happy with your with the staff report you asked for?
One second. Later this evening under section 10, action items required. There is the notice of motion that I put forward under 10.3. So perhaps now is a better time to discuss that because it is directly germane to this report that has been written and the report that we received from the lawyers. However, I'm willing to wait until 10.3 comes up. I don't know if council members would feel it's the same discussion in so many ways.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
Yes. Your worship.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but so the motion that's on the floor is to accept the items as information items to be received and filed. And then the discussion would happen, the fulsome discussion would happen on the item that Councillor Grell just itemized. So I'm more comfortable dealing with it as the action item, but I don't know what the rest of council feels.
Councillor Jameson.
I agree with your deputy mayor. I agree with the mayor.
Okay.
Let's accept these items and we can certainly reference them as we get to the notice of motion procedurally. I think it makes more sense.
All right. Okay. No. Please vote. All in favor of the motion at hand? Carried. Okay. Practice my signature tonight. There we go. Do keep prompting me. Okay. Okay, moving on into the action required items, moved by Councillor Jameson and seconded by Councillor Fody, that council approve the award of tender OPS 2023-002 for the acquisition of a slip-in 2,600 gallon water tank to road maintenance equipment sales in brackets REMS in the amount of $35,000, $107.20, inclusive of the net HST. And that council approve the award of tender OPS 2023-003 for the acquisition of a 3/4 ton truck with snowplow and sander to Petrie Ford Sales in the amount of $106,720.80, inclusive of the net HST. And that council authorize staff to terminate tender OPS 2023-004 for the acquisition of the utility van and reallocate a portion of funds from this account for the overage of OPS 2023-003. Are there any questions or comments regarding the report? Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you, I was talking to our Director of Operations last week, and I would like the Director of Operations to share why we're terminating this.
And the Deputy of Operations has arrived post haste at the podium.
Thank you. So we put out a tender for a van for $40,000. We had reached out to a local dealership that sold this type of a fleet, and they're not the only supplier that was going to be able to provide us a van of this purpose was Ford, and Ford is unable to comply with the tender because they're not available currently. It's my understanding that there is a large contract, and that's the reason why they're not available right now. Is a supplier has, or a purchaser has acquired quite a few of them, so they're out of stock with no timeline for being able to comply with the tender. So we have taken some alternative measures, and we're going to be outfitting with and operating an existing fleet to be able to continue what we're hoping to do.
Any further questions, comments? Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, through to Director Halliday. Was there ever a contract put in place for this van, or was it just kind of an inquiry to find out about the price and whether there was one available?
We put a tender on our bids and tenders, our online tendering program. We received the single bid. So when we knew that we hadn't received another submission, reached out to the other vendor and they had said that they can't comply with it. And obviously this one being much greater than what we had anticipated, it doesn't make sense for us.
A follow-up? Is there any legal binding agreement with them, or are we null and void on this one?
No, in our tenders, we reserve the right to terminate the contracts.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions, comments? Councillor Lackey.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you to the director. Just a quick question on the water tank. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask on behalf of the late Councillor Emmons. Basically, he would say if it was metal, it can be fixed. Is it that drastic that it's literally can't be repaired?
So we sent the current water tank to the local welding company last year. They went inside the tank and repaired it as best they could. It came back to the yard, and a month later, we couldn't keep water in the tank at all. This is an important piece of infrastructure or fleet for us because it's what we use for our gravel resurfacing. It's what we use for our construction, our capital projects for maintaining the stability and integrity of the road. We can put calcium in it. It's something that were we to introduce like a DLA, a direct liquid application of salt on our hard surface roads in future, this piece of equipment is capable to do that as well, where a metal tank cannot do that. So it's very universal.
Right. With no further questions, gentlemen, would you proceed to the vote, please? All in favor? It's carried. Next on the order is operations report SR 03723, support for Green and Inclusive Community Buildings Fund. And it is moved by Councillor Fody and seconded by Councillor Correll, that council authorize staff to apply for the Green and Inclusive Community Buildings Fund applications for the renovations and repairs of the Springfield House and another for Escott Hall. And that council authorize staff to engage LHC Heritage and Planning Archaeology Incorporated to prepare the application for Green and Inclusive Community Buildings Fund in the amount of $10,003.01 inclusive of the net HST. Any comments, questions on this? Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you to our Director of Operations. Is the expectation, if should we be successful in this application, to add this to what we've okayed in the budget for work being done, such as Springfield House and such? This will be in addition to if we get it.
Thank you. Through you. My hope is that this will supplement the money that we have put in the budget for Springfield House. When we prepared the budget, it was a stage process for doing remedial works as required that were identified in the BCA. This would allow us to expedite those by being able to take the larger project on at one time instead of having to apportion it out in different stages. So that this would supplement a large deal of the amount of money that had been budgeted.
Thank you.
Councillor Jameson.
Just a comment, I'm pleased to see you're moving ahead with this operations, Deputy Mayor. Want to just ask, okay, so just because I may be wrong, I may have read the report wrong. So you're going to spend $10,000 to put in an application for other funds to try to offset what we budgeted. So the $10,000 presumably is in the budget numbers that have been assigned to this project. Am I correct in that?
That is correct.
Okay, so in the event that we're successful and we get $1 gazillion, that offsets more of the money that you, so we're trying to state a net in this in terms of what you're actually going to spend. That doesn't change the budget line for the project. It just means you have different sources.
Correct.
Okay,
Ultimately.
that's fine. Thank you.
Any further questions, comments? All right. In that case, let's proceed to the vote. All in favor? It's carried. Is that one? Another one here. Right, this is item 10.3. Moved by Councillor Gorell, seconded by Councillor Maybe. Whereas rooftop amenity space is not currently a permitted use of marine facilities, and whereas there have been significant increase in the applications for such use under zoning exemptions, and whereas recognizing that applications often follow onward from Committee of Adjustment, quote, conditional approvals, unquote, noting that flat roofed marine facilities may be appropriate. And whereas the, quote, unintended consequence, unquote, of the zoning amendment process requires council approval for individual exemption applications based on staff report recommendations. And whereas these planning reports requiring significant input are challenging for staff under the guidance of the official plan, as it has been often demonstrated to equally apply to both proponents and opponents of said applications. And whereas it has been highlighted that dissent from said reports could trigger potential legal action through the Ontario Land Tribunal. Therefore, be it resolved that the issuing of building permits for the construction of flat-roofed marine facilities be temporarily suspended until further review and clarity of policy for inclusion in the zoning bylaw 07-079. Right. I'll recognize first Councillor Gorell.
Thank you. And through you, Deputy Mayor, and if council would allow me a little extra time on this one. Again, I want to say this really takes us in two directions. I'm not strongly promoting one or the other. It's just that what sparked this with me are a few things, and I want to highlight them as briefly as possible. Number one, it was the concept of how things have been coming to council for zoning amendment exceptions on this issue. What the zoning, pardon me, first of all, there are definitely riparian rights for all waterfront homeowners. They have the right to enjoy the waterfront, et cetera, et cetera. However, it is for the townships to make bylaws. And we have the zoning bylaw, which deals with massing and setbacks. In other words, we don't tell them what to put in there. If they want to paint it pink, fine. But we do control how big these things are under the zoning bylaw. That's as clear as a bell. In other words, you're allowed this much, this percentage, this, that perimeter, everything else. That's the envelope, which we can't actually touch once it's established. The other segment of that is you take that envelope and then you move it around in the property, whether it's on the land or in the water, but we're dealing with water. So what has been occurring is applications have been going forward to make the envelope bigger than what the bylaw says. Fine. Where do they go for that? They've been going to the Committee of Adjustment. Committee of Adjustment says, okay, we'll make the envelope bigger than what is allowed in the zoning bylaw. Not a particular problem there. And they take it and they move that thing around in the allowable space, which is your property projection lines. So far, no problem. Let's say that the neighbor thinks, oh, that's innocent enough. I don't have any strong comments on that. They're going to build a bigger envelope. Fine. They're going to move it over here closer to my property line. What the hell? No big deal. Then the problem is that's locked in. Let's say that it's approved. The Committee of Adjustment has locked it in. And those are called provisions. I've read the word conditions, but we'll go with provisions, as I was corrected by the planning department. So now what we have is a bigger mass, say, and it's moved around a little bit, and it didn't seem like a big deal. But then the zoning amendment comes before us. What's the difference? In order to change the usage of something, you need a zoning amendment. So what is topsy-turvy here is the change in that usage may affect the neighborhood. They may not really have thought about it before, but now all of a sudden it comes up and they're concerned. Problem is, it's locked in because the massing, scaling, we're not telling them they can't paint it pink. They can paint it whatever color they want. It can be flat. I don't care. But once that is there, that's not our business. It was our business, how big this thing got and where it got put. But when it comes before council with the planning discussion, it's for an exemption of something that has already been visioned for by the Committee of Adjustment. And I would say that that is wrong-headedness. Two examples I'd like to bring up. One was, I believe it's 311 Stratford over on Hill Island. That's the famous Kavanaugh case. Kavanaugh's boathouse was 2,200 plus square feet. He built it without approvals, apparently, if my memory is right. Then he sought, actually, I think there were two Committee of Adjustment provisions. And of course, they chugged right along, moved it around, did whatever they had to do. And then lo and behold, a few weeks later, it comes in front of us for, oh, we need a zoning amendment to allow for all this business. What were we to do? So that sizing went to the Committee of Adjustment. We had one last week. It didn't come before us. It was just simply it was a planning meeting. In other words, a public planning meeting. The boathouse is 2,500 plus square feet. I distinctly asked the planning department, I said, why isn't that in front of the Committee of Adjustment for the size envelope? Well, it didn't follow under minor variance. What was the difference between the Kavanaugh 2250 or whatever it was and the 2,500? Those are just sort of questions that hang out in my head. So what I'm saying is there's some inconsistency in my mind. And I just want to make the point that once those provisions are made by a Committee of Adjustment, they're done. It's done for. Whereas if you didn't do that, if something came before council, then council, with the aid of the planning department, could deal with, at the same time as they're dealing with the amendment, they could also be dealing with provisions. Does that make sense? In other words, instead of being locked into the provisions, we could have a say in them. If you want to approve this, then maybe this needs to happen. If this doesn't happen, well, maybe that doesn't happen. But the way it's written, it comes before us and it's almost like take it or leave it. And then the planning department has been supporting these things because they feel it's their privilege to feel that the official plan, and that gets back to this report, staff report that they just printed out for us, an excellent report it is. But I could go through that, as did a member of the public previously, and say many things in that official plan support an alternate view. Because that's the nature of a guiding document. It is not a regulatory document. It is a guiding document, as the provincial policy statement was before that. So nicely laid out, nicely printed, nicely highlighted. So the problem I had was what I have just told you. It got termed topsy-turvy. It was getting hijacked. The system was being hijacked, and it will continue to be hijacked. So I simply thought that, hey, why don't we just take a deep breath, take a step back, and do an interim, pardon me, let's just put a hold on it through, don't issue a building permit. That you cannot do, as we were told by our lawyers and is highlighted in the planning report before us tonight. It was pretty clear. There's no arguments. That takes us to step number 2 in this discussion. Now, because we are discussing my notice of motion, I've tried to explain why I put it forward. It was just to put a timeout on something so we could discuss it. I do realize after the discussion with the lawyer and the concept of the interim control bylaws, that this is too much for right now. It's simply too much to take on, I believe. Even I'm going to admit that. I thought it would be simple. It got so complex so quickly, even I'm going to say, whoa. However, something came of that. All that lawyer talk, all of this talk and discussion of interim control bylaws, it is a powerful thing to have in your back pocket. We might not, I don't suggest we use it in this case. I really don't think there's enough need for it. So, but it does open up a whole nother door. And going down the road, this report from earlier tonight goes to great length to highlight what the protections are for our waterways. So when it's necessary, interim control bylaws are a tool in the toolkit. Do we need them? I'm not sure. Down the road we may, because that's my concern, down the road. And I thought that if we just took a deep breath on this, on a rooftop amenity space, the way it has been presented to us, that needs to change. So whatever needs to happen, let's make it happen. And I'm willing to even withdraw this notice of motion so that it doesn't have to really get kicked around and waste a bunch of time. Because I think the lawyer was pretty clear that it's an expensive process and one that requires a study. And then what is it that you're studying? Well, obviously, I'm not going to waste the taxpayers' money on something so narrowly defined. If it was more broadly defined, as was mentioned by the lawyer, we were free to open it up. Now is not the time. Down the road may be, and I'm going to remember interim control bylaws. So that's my speech for tonight regarding this. If we don't table it, or pardon me, if I was to withdraw it, it's not going to hurt anybody's feelings. Just let me know how you feel about that. But I would like us to talk about this business of getting hijacked with the, again, let me say that again, the massing of this thing and then the shifting around in there. If you're going to bring that to me, I need to have the ability to change some of those provisions, but you can't the way it's been doing right now. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grell. Would anyone else like to comment on this matter? Councillor Lackey.
Thank you, through you, Deputy Mayor. So for clarification, I want to get something straight because in the way it's worded is we're talking about two different things. We're talking about the zoning bylaw for the usage, and we're talking about a term I'll use is a moratorium on people being able to build flat top boathouses. Is that correct? Because they're two different things.
There's a number of different things there. I'm not against flat top boathouses. They have a place and everything. It might be good technical reasons for that. It was the process of what I described in my mind of it going through a committee of adjustment. They provide the provisions and then it's locked in because that is set. So I'm sorry, Jeff, and with respect to
The motion here.
the motion, I can
Because
go
there's-
over every
there's an
paragraph if
ask.
you want me to.
There is an ask, and I'm just wanting to clarify what the ask is.
The ask was a temporary moratorium on building permits. What I pointed out, as is in this report, we know that that is not a proper, cannot be done in the
Can-
Planning Act.
Right.
And the planning department was kind enough to bring us back a report with the lawyer saying there is a real snafu with trying to do that. You can't, or you shouldn't. If you do, it's very specific how you do it. So I'm willing to admit I was unaware of that, as was everybody. And having had that information, I am now, as I said, willing to withdraw, not table this and just withdraw it. It makes no problem for me whatsoever. I'm not going to fight this.
All
I'm
right,
not going to fight
gentlemen.
anybody. Thank you.
I think we need to hear from the planner. I respect your your intensity on this too, by the way. Go ahead.
Thank you, through you. I just wanted to provide some clarification that I think might be helpful for council. First of all, with respect to some of the applications that have been brought forward, planning's not a science. And process is variable, and we look at what we can do from a process perspective depending on the situation in front of us. With respect to the 5 applications for amenity space on boathouse rooftops that we've received over the last number of years, in 3 instances, the form of the boathouse in terms of the size, the scale, the location, the setbacks, as well as the use have been brought together to council as a package. And ideally, that's the way it should be. But nothing's ever perfect when people do things on their property at times, and some people do things and we have to figure out how to fix it, which is why in the case of the first one that was referenced by Councillor Gorell, the use of the structure wasn't brought forward to us as a request until after the minor variances had been granted. So what was the mechanism to correct that situation and try to bring it into compliance? It was to bring it forward as a zoning bylaw amendment. So what's the difference between a minor variance and a zoning bylaw amendment? A minor variance is a variance to a provision of a zoning bylaw. So if you don't comply with a yard, a setback, a size, a lot coverage, for example, or height, a minor variance can vary the provisions of the zoning bylaw to allow for something to proceed. In looking at that, there's 4 tests of a minor variance that are set out under the Planning Act. And those are what we look at when we bring forward a recommendation to the Committee of Adjustment. When we're looking at a zoning bylaw amendment, every amendment to a zoning bylaw has to be consistent with the official plan, which has to be consistent with the county official plan, which has to be consistent with the provincial policy statement. And that's the policy test for a zoning amendment. So with respect to interpreting the official plan, with respect to interpreting the provincial policy statement, as a professional planner, I have to bring forward recommendations to council that I'm prepared to defend in front of the Ontario Land Tribunal. And that relates to Committee of Adjustment applications as well. So as a registered professional planner, that's a test that we have to meet in terms of bringing forward a recommendation. If I'm not prepared to bring forward a recommendation to council because I don't have the information I need, or because I don't think something is suitable, I would work with the applicant in that situation to try to address the situation. With respect to properties, properties vary, size of properties vary, setbacks vary, dimensions vary. So there's different things, different considerations on every property that we have to look at in bringing forward a recommendation. So as I said, planning is not a science, but we have our tests set out for us in terms of our policy documents. And that's what we make our recommendations to council with respect to. So I just wanted to clarify that in terms of process. With respect to the consideration of the use and the amenity space on the rooftops, that is absolutely a zoning bylaw amendment. And ideally, we would be bringing forward new boathouses that don't meet the setbacks of the zoning bylaw, that are requesting sun decks in a package for full council consideration. So we have the ability to look at all of the potential impacts in the context of that under those circumstances. So one thing we can do as a planning department, which we have been doing, is when we get inquiries with respect to these, we can be more critical in terms of what we do. And we have been doing that. So I just wanted to provide that clarification. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Are there any further questions for the planner? Councillor,
So what, through you, Deputy Mayor, what are our next steps? Are you withdrawing your?
Councillor Jameson, are you willing to withdraw your?
I move that I withdraw. Yeah, I move to withdraw my recommendation or whatever.
We're not done discussing it. Okay.
Oh.
Councillor Jameson.
I'm not sure I'm ready to see us withdraw this. Not because we may well, but I guess I understand and all the good information we've received from the planner, Deputy Mayor, has been great. I think that the challenge sitting here for me at this stage has more to do with what are we trying to achieve? In the sense that, and I was talking to Councillor Fody about this earlier, the business of trying to retain the integrity of a neighborhood. I mean, it could be almost anything in a community, in a district, with a consistency of application for this particular application for a marine facility. If we stuck with the bylaw as it stands, the original bylaw as it stands, none of this would be on the table. You just wouldn't be able to build these things, my interpretation. But I do understand and respect that in the context of getting zoning amendments or going to committee of adjustments, these things can be allowed. But we don't have sort of an overarching idea of what we want to see in the community in these particular districts. I don't anticipate, well, I should never say I don't anticipate. I don't anticipate seeing it up on the Rideau Canal, at least around the area I live, but stranger things have happened up there. So my suggestion is that we defer this motion and that we basically form a committee of council and work with planning department to try to identify some of the principles of application to this situation that may serve us to decide whether we want to put a moratorium on it. So I don't think that if we said, okay, we're going to put a moratorium on it, that we could do it all in a year. We just simply wouldn't be able to. It costs us a fortune. We all know that. And I don't think we have time with public consultation. It wouldn't be done right. But we need to know as a council what we're thinking about, what we would like the township to look like with respect to these things. Because what we're approving are pleasure decks under which you can park a boat. We're not talking about a place to put a boat anymore. We're talking about a pleasure deck. You shove a boat under it. Depends on what size of boat it is. It might be bigger or wider, whatever. I'd like us to know or have an idea from the public, too, obviously, what their expectation is for life on the river or on the canal or wherever it happens to be with respect to non-essential buildings. So my last point being is no one will be homeless if a pleasure deck doesn't go up in the immediate future. So why don't we defer this and try to get a committee of the willing around council to sit with our planning people for a couple of hours and maybe talk to our community. Maybe we need a survey. I don't know. I just don't think we have a vision for what we want to see, and we're going to get caught with this every once in a while. It's possible we'll get a lot. It's probable that we won't get a lot, but we will have to deal with it. But we don't know what we want. We don't know what the community wants. So let's defer it, have a conversation, and then come back to it later. That's my suggestion.
It sounds to me like we're doing two different things, though.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Sorry, to interrupt you.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
If just based on the comment made by Councillor Jameson, deferring it, the intent of the motion that's at hand is to, sorry, I'm just flipping screens here. Please, I apologize. So the last is therefore be it resolved, the issuing of building permits for construction of flat roof marine facilities be temporarily suspended till further review and clarity of policy for inclusion in zoning bylaws 07079. So while I think I understand what Councillor Jameson's request is, I think that withdrawal of the motion actually makes more sense so that a more correct motion can come forward to accomplish what Councillor Jameson is asking. So just procedurally, I think that I understand what Councillor Jameson is asking, but the motion as it sits on the books, it doesn't accomplish what he's asking. Does that make sense, Councillor Jameson?
Yes and no. Yes, I understand what you're saying from a procedural standpoint. No, because sometimes when these things fall off the table, they have a bad habit of not coming back. And I'm not accusing us of any of these things, Your Worship. I'm just saying, I think we need to keep the focus on what appears to be an emerging problem, not by going down a road with actually passing the motion, but to defer it while we think about what we really want to do. I take your point. You withdraw it and you bring another motion in. That's all procedure. I'm all for that. But I really don't think that if it goes off the table, it's going to come back with quite the energy that Councillor Gorell has brought to the table on the thing. Well worth his effort, in my view. Thank you.
All right, I'll recognize Councillor Foti.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you. If I may weigh in on the procedural, Councillor Grell put the notice of motion forward, not Councillor Jameson. So procedurally, we have a notice of motion. If Councillor Jameson's idea flies, that will be seen in due time. We do have a notice of motion to deal with. In comments to the notice of motion, there's very little, if any, I would disagree with on Councillor Grell's comments on this whole myriad of what we've been affronted with the last couple of years. What I was affronted with starting Thursday afternoon were phone calls from contractors who I was pleased on one aspect, and I guess I did mention it to one of them. I was pleased that they follow our council and our proceedings as well as they do, and that they were onto it on the very day that it was put out. Needless to say, the contractors don't want us to put a stop to any of this, and there was some good pointed reasons made there. A couple that I remember distinctly was some of these projects are large, multi-million-dollar projects, and they've been in the works for a couple of years to get to the stage where they are now. If we pull the plug on this tonight in any way, shape, or form, what are these people to do? Likely come back on us with a ticket for the amount of money they paid out in the last 2 years to try and get through our hoops and hurdles to attain what our requirements actually are. But the point at hand of the flat top, the Councillor Grell's notice of motion, I think Councillor Jameson will all agree that we need to come up with something. And this notice of motion, thank you, brought all this discussion to the forefront. We have to come up with something because what we have now just isn't good enough. And Councillor Grell explained it best and why. It's like lining the dominoes up on the top shelf of this horseshoe. It wouldn't matter whether you tapped it on this side or tapped it on that side. They still all go down. So whether the pyramid's upside down or not, there's something not right. I mean, everything is being done right, but it's not right. I would like us not to see us put a moratorium on anything just yet because there's too many people with monies laid out doing everything we've asked them to at this point. But Councillor Jameson may have come up with a good idea here that we ourselves maybe could try and solve this problem amongst ourselves between the staff and council. Thank you.
Councillor Lackey.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you. Our official plan is kind of an overall umbrella. And it doesn't differentiate whether you're on a small back lake or an ocean or St. Lawrence River. It can't. It has to be an overall. And that's why we have our bylaws. That's why we have all these rules and regulations that I sent you today. Those are our tools that we have right now. And I think they're good tools. I think they're maybe a little too ambitious, especially in looking at some of the other ones, but the St. Lawrence is unique because I don't know if you've all forgotten, but it does lead to the ocean. So anything that'll fit through those locks downriver can come upriver into our municipality. So that means there's going to be larger vessels, going to be, more money sifting through. There's going to be a lot of things, and that doesn't apply to the back lakes at all. Matter of fact, we have one that is solely privately owned. They have no motorboats whatsoever. And that had nothing to do with us. That was the landowners decided because they basically own it. This is what we're doing. But we have CRCA who's very strict with what they do. We also have our Fisheries and Oceans. So I think as it stands right now, we are doing a good job, and I will agree with Councillor Grell and Councillor Jameson that, yeah, there are probably some things we can review to make it easier for staff. But in the meantime, that's part of our job where we have to make these decisions. And sometimes we make it personal where we should probably deal with what's in front of us on paper and not get personally invested in what's happening. But I understand how things go. The boathouse is the box, and the zoning bylaw is what goes on top of the box. And we can't have a say over that box if it goes through committee of adjustment. That's the way it is. They're provincially regulated. That's so basically all we have is our bylaws. So if we want to review that, I'm all for that.
We have a motion on the floor, a notice of motion. And it's been suggested by its author that it be withdrawn. Now, I'm told that in order to do that, the seconder has to agree as well. And then we've had the other suggestion, coattailing on it, is that we come up with a committee of council to more fully focus on this whole issue with the input of the staff. That was referred to you, Councillor Jameson. We can't do a notice of motion in this meeting. It would have to come at the next committee of the whole. Yes, Councillor Jameson.
I'll withdraw their suggestion because I know where it's going.
Thank you. And through you, Deputy Mayor, then formally, I will put forward a withdrawal based upon the seconder of this notice of motion to withdraw it. Seconder?
Okay. Councillor, maybe you second it? Okay. All right, all in favor of withdrawing the motion? Carried. Okay, this one's lost, right? Just sign it. All right. Pardon me. Okay, I have some notes here that say mayor's update, and I expect I'll be corrected if I say something's wrong here, but okay, they're in point form notes, which I'll have to read. Okay, the Rockport Winter Carnival was held from February the 8th to the 12th. I was not able to attend, but I imagine Councillor Gorell has an opinion.
It looks like all they had a good time. I saw a lot of children in the pictures and the weather was perfect. So
wonderful. Okay. Suggest that people visit the community events calendar on our website for upcoming events, including the Science Cafe and events at the farmhouse and at Furnace Falls Farm. Always a good time and lots of good meals. Family Day is next Monday, and TLTI has a variety of programs for residents and their families to take part in. Do visit our website for a full list of the programs. Heritage Week is from February 20th to February 26th, and it provides an opportunity for individuals and communities to reflect on their contributions to Ontario. how heritage is conserved, promoted, commemorated, and how they might shape the future. And we have quite a good heritage committee of council and quite a good historical group, and many interesting things to see along these lines, starting from the canal to hidden away farmhouses. TLTI wants to hear from our community about the best way to communicate information. And please take a few minutes to provide us with your feedback by completing our 2023 communication survey. It can be found in our February and March Township Times newsletter and on our website. The deadline to complete the survey is February 21st. We've received 314 responses so far, and your feedback is appreciated. Now, just to assist, where do people have to return the surveys to? There are manual ones as well as online ones.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, they are able to fill them out online. So they're submitted on our website, and they're also able to submit them to the township office.
Okay, the libraries aren't involved in collecting them for us?
I believe the libraries are involved as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now calling all community organizations, the Community Grants Program. Spring intake is now open and applications are due on Friday, April the 7th. All right. Next item, announcements. Does any member have any announcement? Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just to remind everybody, tomorrow is Valentine's Day, so please be mindful of the one who brings you the most joy in your world. It is important that they're recognized. Family Day was mentioned, but also Gananoque has Winterpalooza all month long. And one other interesting fact, I was listening to My FM last week that brought a big chuckle to me, that the ice rink was open over here. It may not be right now, but then the fire department put out, no ice is safe ice. So it made me laugh all the way, the rest of the way to work. So it was quite comical that our ice isn't safe. I hope the ambulance is staying close to the rink then. Thank you.
I will say that watching at Frost Fest, the children and other people skating on the rink that had been cleared on the bay was quite a joy and much enjoyed by many people. Okay. Any further announcements? Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, through you. Just clarity. Some people are asking, I've received just a handful of phone calls myself on why the ice rink is closed here in Lansdowne. A lot of people have forgotten there's a pickleball court that we professionally painted underneath that layer of plastic. Layer of plastic doesn't mean much to a skate blade. So we ask people to bear the patience. Not everybody's happy with Mother Nature like myself, but should we get cold weather back, we'll have ice back. But until we do, that gate remains locked. We ask everybody to stay off that pad until there's enough thick ice to protect the painted pickleball court that's underneath it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fody. And again, about ice, I hear that people are still going out ice fishing. It's rather dangerous. I would counsel against it personally. Okay, bylaws. Item 13.1, bylaw 23-015, facility use policy. Bylaw 23-016, confirmation of bylaw in February. The mover is Councillor Lackey, seconded by Councillor Gorell. That 3 readings and final passage be granted to the bylaws 23-015, and that 3 readings and final passage be granted to bylaw 23-016, being a bylaw to confirm the proceeding of the corporation, the Township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands, at its February 6th committee of the whole meeting and February 13th council meeting. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. I don't often do this, or it's not often done, but someone noticed the time and what the time might be where the mayor is right now. So thank you for bearing with us. There we go. I missed something. No. Adjourn. And finally, moved by Counselor Jameson, seconded by Counselor Gorell, that council adjourn. All in favor? Thank you. Good night, everybody.